My God, this came in half an hour ago. Why didn't I... Hello. Put your colonel on. Well, wake him up. I don't care if he's not alone. Damn it all, I don't care who he's with. You bloody well put him on the line.
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
It's the first time they've ever replied, the listening people. That's their voice. Hello.
Yeah, they're really dubbed like a martial arts film.
Hello. It's me, the listening people. And we listen with people.
Hey, wait a minute.
Hey, wait a minute. If that was in this movie, that would have escalated it to a top tier.
Yeah, said Ryan Slewinski.
Said Bartek. No last name needed. We all know it.
Go ahead, Ryan. You can say it. I don't mind. I give you permission.
Mr. Bartek Krabby Patties. That's how it's pronounced, right?
Come on, I'm older than SpongeBob, aren't I? It's a 90s show, but it wasn't 93, was it?
Well, I don't know. Maybe your mum got inspired. I like the idea that your last name you question is older than SpongeBob.
Well, my last name for sure, but me.
Yeah, you, but you aren't your last name. Your last name is just something that carries over.
And that something is?
Polish.
The last name is?
Spitting.
Well, it's the other thing in our title, Spit and Polish presents.
I said Polish just a second ago, and you're like, no.
I'm giving you a concession.
No more concessions on this podcast. We are a podcast that talks about movies, and movies are here to be talked about by two Polish gentlemen who spit on the poor. We would never enter a martial arts competition. We don't need that prestige or money or clout, perhaps. Maybe the opium, that would be a nice little plus. But in all seriousness, to dial it back a bit, we have our show Pictures Powwow, the original PP, as I like to call it, where we talk about a movie that has come recommended. Bartek recommends a movie one week, then it is me, then it is you, the listening people. Last episode, we had a listening people's recommendation. So if you can work out the maths here, the scientific equations on the board, it all points to it being a Bartek recommendation for this episode. Bartek's looking up. He's darting his eyes. He's doing a Rain Man. He's trying to figure it out.
Ryan, listening people.
And then,
yep.
Mm-hmm. He got it.
You got it.
Bartek, you recommended a very iconic foreign film.
It's foreign to us, for sure, but yes. So Ryan, I think you're delving a little bit into my idiosyncratic. Speaking of my idiosyncrasies, choosing of films.
Yes.
In that, not only is it that I have my episode every 3 weeks, but also I have my own little cycle where 1 week I will pick a Hollywood, definitely American film, and then a film that's, not necessarily foreign, but just not American. And that this was meant to be my not American pick, because after all, even though I'm not familiar with what Enter the Dragon was,
surely the Warner Brothers logo wouldn't open up the film.
But based on just what I knew about it, it's like an iconic Hong Kong film, right? Like, very firmly, this is just a really good Hong Kong film. And definitely not an American co-production with Hong Kong with an American director.
And by Warner Brothers.
By Warner Brothers, and with the primary language being English.
With American actors. Surely not. But
then when I was looking up, why can't I find an original Cantonese version of this film? I guess it's English and Cantonese.
I guess it's because they filmed it without any sound and dub it over for the English people. So there is technically no original language film of this because they didn't film any of the audio except for one singular scene.
Yeah, with the British guy, right?
Well, that's an interesting figure. I looked that actor up. He died right when this came out. Him and Bruce Lee died really around the same time.
So the two guys whose voices we actually heard live.
And he, on his IMDb, doesn't give any trivia, just says he was a famous Hong Kong radio personality.
Okay.
Didn't tell me where he was from, whether he was, I assume he was English, but like it didn't tell me anything further other than that information. He was in this movie and he died before his acting career got to take off into the stratosphere because he was a well-known Hong Kong radio personality and this was the big leap. And then he passed away. It doesn't even really specify too much of how he passed away. Just on IMDb, I didn't do much further digging. I was like, when I was watching this, I was kind of looking at certain actors and the director and so on and so forth to kind of get a feel of things. Why? Mainly because when I saw that character, the Braithwaite character, I was like, who's this English guy? And then I was like, oh, I don't know. It's just this guy. It's just this guy. He's in one other film as an uncredited background character, like a customer at bank type deal.
But I think he'd do well at his customer at bank.
I think the film, let me check, Spider-Man 2, it's by Sam Raimi.
He came back from the dead. He really, really, really wanted to work with Doc Ock.
He really, really wanted to work with
Alfred
Joel
Molina.
McHale. Yeah, Joel McHale is the bank guy who grabbed that one coin and then they smacked it. Yes, that's Joel McHale. That's Joel McHale. Remember how the Sam Raimi movies have weirdly, before they became big, casting people like Octavia Spencer in the first movie as the wrestling person who signs him up?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Octavia Spencer, bitch.
Right, yeah.
But let's get into Enter the Dragon, 1973.
Let's get in that dragon.
73.
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken.
Last week I was banking on 72, but it was 73.
You got a lot wrong. You thought this was not American in nature. You thought that Bruce Lee was only in 6 films total, while according to IMDb, I think he's in more.
Well, I thought that was like a big trivia point about Bruce Lee. It's like, oh, he was only in 6 films.
Maybe 6 martial arts.
Which is ironic next to all the Bruce exploitation films that exist out there.
So people, if you've not seen Enter the Dragon before, we're going to discuss it in details.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it before, you've probably seen something inspired by it.
I would say so. We're talking about Enter the Dragon, not Enter the Fat Dragon from 2020. Just FYI. I haven't
heard of it. Any good?
Oh, I didn't watch it. I watched Enter the Dragon.
Okay, well, I know your pick for next week.
My history with this film is not too complicated. I know of its legacy, its reputation, the iconography, the visuals, Bruce Lee. It is not a Bruce Lee film I had seen before. I had seen the one with Chuck Norris, which was
Way of the Dragon,
and then the one we watched at university, which was
Fists of Fury.
So those were the 2 I had seen.
Yeah, that's like movie 2, movie 3. This is movie 4 of the 6 that I'm aware of. But apparently there's more.
And so that is my overall deal with this. You recommended it. I nodded, going, hey, you know what? I'm up for that. I'm not objecting to kung fu movies. If I can kind of go into my background, I'm not huge into these kind of Hong Kong action movies or your martial arts or kung fu movies. I've seen some. I've mainly seen satires of them with stuff like Black Dynamite. I've seen some, black exploitation, like kung fu inspired, like you said, like there's lots of movies inspired, lots of genres inspired by this, but I haven't really sat down and watched too many of these actual ones. Like on this podcast, the closest we've ever gotten is doing Kung Pao and the film that Kung Pao was based on.
Yeah, we've done Kung Pao, we've done Tiger and Crane Fist, we did Rumble in the Bronx.
And you're right, and Story of Ricky.
And Story of Ricky, yeah.
You're right. We've actually done a good amount of
To be honest, when I was going to list our history, I actually kind of forgot about Kung Pao and Tiger and Crane Fist, to be honest.
How could, you know what, I couldn't forget about it when watching this movie, because there were certain moments with the bad guy, I was just really wanting to say...
Well, with me, to get into my history, I obviously also know of this film's legacy. I've just always known this title. Then over the years, learning a bit more about, what the plot is and how, a lot of other things have kind of taken this idea of martial arts tournament on a person's island and the person in charge is kind of like a villain kind of thing.
There's like a ping pong movie that does that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with Christopher Walken as the bad guy. And he's still like an Asian guy, but he's just Christopher Walken and like with the big hair and the robe and whatever.
Okay. Well, I know what your pick for next week is.
Yeah.
Yeah, a big one for me would be that in the film Kentucky Fried Movie, which is a kind of anthology film with all these, ads going on the whole way through. It's just like an ad film. The longest segment by far is Fistful of Yen, which is also a parody of martial arts films. But having watched this now, that was really just like a parody of this film. Like it's so many visuals with the same, like the underground like lair area, the sneaking around. The film begins with a fight, going to the island, the villain being this kind of evil guy in charge. It was like, it almost felt like I'd seen this film before simply because I've seen that Fistful of Yen segment a few times.
Yeah.
And martial arts films, we haven't done too many of them on the podcast. They are very, very different beasts to talk about because
they're simple.
Simple,
effective.
Yeah, we've done a couple of films in the past, mainly ones from the 50s or 40s, even on other people's podcasts, where when we talk about the ending, we say like, "Oh, this film just ends." Like when we did Walter Mitty with the Contrarians. Martial arts films are a lot like that because the climax is really where the film wants to be done.
Yeah,
like the final, like in The Big Boss, Bruce Lee's first film that I know of. Maybe there was something else. As soon as he is done with his revenge, like he looks to the side, the cops are clearly coming. You get a big, very long shot, and then credits appear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, no repercussions after that, as far as we're aware. We've seen the final fight. Film's done.
Yeah.
And this one, we get a little bit of a thumbs up moment, but then we get the credits, and it's like, oh, there we go, martial arts ending. So yeah, there are different conventions at play here, different things to talk about compared to even, Harley Davidson or anything else we've done.
One of the things that I really liked about this was that I've had problems with other films of this variety, whether it was Story of Ricky, whether it was Rumble in the Bronx, where those two are far more comedic in tone, so they kind of have an excuse to get away with this. But in some kung fu movies, they exist in a world where everybody can just fight. Just everyone knows how to fight. Well, what I liked about Enter the Dragon is they manufactured a reason in the story why he's in an environment where everybody can fight, rather than just everyone in the universe knows how to, block people and kick and flip and everything like that. They really went out of their way to have it in this isolated island full of fighters, and I thought that was a nice change of pace for me when it comes to this, because sometimes it's like, even in, say, Rumble in the Bronx, it's like, here's an American gang, yet they still all know how to fight Jackie Chan and do all that.
Yeah, you know what?
It's kind of like, it's fun, but that's a part of the fun. That's why like Samurai Cop is really funny, because it's like in a world where everybody practically knows how to do Samurai Cop moves, where they like swing swords and run around and do kung fu, but they shouldn't know how to do that because they're just normal gangsters.
Yeah, I don't remember as much with Fists of Fury, but the other two Bruce Lee films I've seen both actually kind of do that pretty well. Like the first film is, he moves to an island where he's got his extended relatives and most of his family and the villagers there, like, they're not fighters or anything like that. They're being oppressed by the villain who does have, fighters employed for him. And Way of the Dragon has a similar thing where not only does the film begin with like 10 minutes of airport hijinks where like he's eating food and a British lady's like, oh my word. She doesn't know martial arts, I don't think. But he goes to like, I think also extended family running a restaurant in Rome, and they're being oppressed as well. So yeah, maybe there's just something about Bruce Lee films where...
But, well, a good one will figure out a way to do it. Like Kung Fu Hustle found out a way to where it's like certain people knew how to fight and certain people were just people and they would try. Or they have a convention where it's like this whole apartment block is just filled with people who know how to fight. And again, comedic ones can get away with it easier because it's like, oh, well, it's silly.
If it's funny, yeah, do it.
Funny's funny.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the 70s filmmaking aesthetics and atmosphere of this.
Oh, yeah.
Not just of that, but also of the, these type of fighting films, the music, the hairstyles, the overall costuming, color palette, the font choices, the sound effects. I thought all of this went so smoothly down, and I wasn't enjoying it in that kind of like, oh, how ironic and funny and silly. I think I mentioned a little while back how there were certain camera movements and choices made in films where it's like you use them now and they're kind of funny, like when you use a snap zoom. Most of the time it has a little bit of an inherent giggle because it's like, this isn't something we use all the time anymore.
Yeah.
Like when Tarantino does it in Django Unchained, it's kind of funny when he does it. But like in films like this, they used it with no sense of humor behind it. This was like, a well-used filmmaking technique. And this has a lot of that where it's like, these work because they worked, but at some point we overused them, and other films, lower budget ones, crappier ones, sillier ones, just used them as a crutch or an extension where it kind of became old hat in a way. And I was just really enjoying the filmmaking of this, where I was actually quite surprised. Like in my brain, I was expecting a lot more of the camera to stay back and still and just show us the fighting, but actually there was a lot of like close to them camera positions where it's like really tight, in which I was a bit surprised by that, because a part of the Bruce Lee, I guess, mythos, because he's kind of, he's ascended to this figure where he's like, it's kind of even hard to think of Bruce Lee as like a person anymore.
He's legendary.
Like, he's a legend. Like his trivia just says like considered the greatest martial artist of the 20th century. I'm like, okay, like yeah, that's what I assume too. Like that's how everyone talks about it, but I was thinking about how usually you come to these type of movies, whether it's your Jackie Chan's or your Bruce Lee's or so on and so forth, to see them basically fight in front of you, to see this beautiful choreography and just look at it in awe from these wide shots, to know that they're actually doing it for real. And he's doing it for real. But what I was surprised at is just how tight in the shots were. And how, that was a bit more of a surprise to me with this one.
A lot of the really standout moments were like, I'd say mid shots, like the nunchuck scene, that was waist up. I also had that kind of surprise, especially with the first scene, which the film opens on, a fight that's about to happen. And there were a lot of, not even mid shots, like even closer up shots where they were doing things. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought we were going to see some bit more full body. Like I remember that a bit more with Rumble in the Bronx, where I guess there were a lot more environmental things going on there, like the bar scene, using all this stuff.
Or
like
his toilet.
The toilet, yeah. And this film did have that as well, with like weapons and things like that. But yeah, you're right. There were a lot more shots where you don't even see the legs.
Yeah, it was a very claustrophobic film, because you actually felt the isolation of them being on this island and them only being allowed in certain areas. I thought that stuff's great, because a little part of me was walking in with a level of already predetermined disengagement from the idea that this was just going to be a fighting film. Like, I'm going to be here for the fighting, and that's good, but I was being a bit down. No, like, I didn't mean to be down, but that was just my preconceptions.
I know what you're saying. Like, when I was saying earlier how this is a different type of film and we haven't really done that much of it on the podcast, so we're going to be talking about it in a different way, so our expectations are going to be different. The things that we think we're going to be focusing on will be different. I even walked into it, thinking that, and I knew this was a martial arts film, so there might be a bit more of a challenge to it. Yeah,
and although still the story is super simple, and it's usually just there as a thread and or framework for the fights to hang off of, it still was very effective in what it did. I was also taken with how this had an ensemble of characters that we were following, not just Bruce Lee the entire movie. There are whole stretches where we're following these 2 or 3 other people.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed those characters very, very much so. Those performers were really great. I knew some of them already from previous things, like Mr. Roper, the John Saxton. I've seen him in stuff like he's in the Freddy movies.
Right.
So, and in one of them, Freddy's was it Freddy's Nightmare, New Nightmare, whatever. The one where it gets all meta, he plays himself. So he's an interesting figure. So I knew him, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm in. So that was a nice little detailing surprise of like, this is going to have all these other characters we're going to follow, and they're going to maybe team up with Bruce, which is partly what happens at the end. Like the one that survives gets to team up with Bruce, but they never actually talk to each other about teaming up. They just do it.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. And I was also like really taken by the action in a way that I wasn't expecting when there was that scene at the beginning where we get the flashback to his sister. If that's his sister, right? Yeah.
It was his sister, yeah.
And how she died. And I was rolling my eyes because you have the guy protecting her and he cuts that guy in the face. That's how that bad guy gets the scar. And he's like, run for your life. And then she just kind of stands there being an idiot. I've seen that so many times in movies. And then she runs and she falls over and she's running in that way where it's like, I can't decide where to go. But then as soon as the guys get close to her, she kicks their ass. And I was like, yes, this is what I want. And
if she wasn't so outnumbered, like she could have survived the whole thing.
She could have survived it and could have done very well. But that locked me in with the movie. That action scene is one of my favorites in this film. I was not saying it's the best, but it was one of my favorites because it just won me over. Because I was expecting one thing and then I got another.
It was an interesting chase scene too, because we got to see, the environment, and I didn't read too much of the trivia, just mostly because I was running out of time. I had to leave to come here. But one that I did see was that apparently Bruce Lee wanted to get across, I think the phrasing was some sort of like aesthetic, cultural beauty of China in this film. And we kind of got that with that scene where it was a chase scene through this, I don't know if it was set in China or in Hong Kong, but like this village area. And it's like, okay, we don't see too many of locations like these in a lot of the films that we do watch. So when we do a martial arts film, it's nice that we actually, feel like we're watching something that feels Chinese or Hong Kong.
I also had a giggle in this fight scene because it has one of my favorite dumb things in movies and shows. It always gets a laugh out of me, which is she kicks one guy into a little creek or river, and he immediately goes stiff. Like, as soon as he hits the water, he just goes, like, limp. And it's like, oh, no, the water knocked him out. It's always amusing to me in video games, movies, shows, when it's like, oh, no, I touched water.
You knocked him into insta-kill zone.
Yeah, I got knocked into insta-kill or paralyzed zone. Oh.
That happens later on in the nunchuck scene as well.
Yeah. I just always find that really funny. Just amusing. Well, the nunchuck scene, if we're thinking of the same bit, when he knocks a guy into like the scary water, though, where they killed the other guy. So it's like, that's scary water. They've established that as like other type of water. But this guy, he just got knocked into a little creek, and he's like, oh, I'm gone.
It was a Spyro 1 creek. You're going to drown.
I'll give him fairness. He did start to move and get out and go back to the chase. He didn't like die like how they usually do in these movies. Is that something you ever notice in films and TV shows when there are fight scenes like that and they knock somebody into some water and it's like, oh, they're down for the count now?
I guess maybe some. Like, for some reason, I'm thinking of Surf Ninjas, like the restaurant fight scene where you could see like people not getting hit and getting knocked out, or some of them like getting knocked out but then getting up to run out of frame.
So we were both pretty unfamiliar with what we were getting into. So tell me a bit about your experience when this all started to unfold, like what you thought of the overall story, atmosphere, presentation.
Well, since the thing that I was mainly familiar about, through pop culture osmosis was the whole idea of, going on a boat to an island to engage in a tournament, I was actually quite surprised that it takes until like 1/3 to halfway into the film to actually get there. Like, there was a lot of setting up going on. They were actually establishing who our villain was, how he was, an ex-student who, turned to sort of evil kind of thing.
Establishing his henchmen.
Yeah, establishing his henchmen, establishing the criminal empire that he's built up. So it's not just, we need to beat this guy just because. It was those actual real stakes to it.
Establishing the other people going to the fights.
Yeah, establishing other people. And like you said, with aesthetics there, like they were great and they looked great, especially Williams, the black guy, the jig, as the film calls him.
What was that? I'm sure that's yes, that was the statement made.
Yeah, his afro, just how neat it looked, the way he dressed, the way,
Well,
he
he knew how good looking he was. He told us.
he captured the eyes.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. What about the quote unquote New Zealand man that they had? The one that Bruce let into the boat and then let him go. They said he was from New Zealand.
Fighting without fighting.
He's from Queensland in Australia.
There you go.
As soon as I heard he was from New Zealand, I had to look that up. I was like, is he? This was before he even spoke. The asshole guy, I was like, I have to look this up. That's why I started looking up actors. And I was like, oh, he's from Queensland. And then a part of me was like, well, I'm sure they'll make a reason for why they said New Zealand in the movie. And then there was no reason, and he never sounded New Zealand. He sounded Australian. So there's a part of me that's just like, in the script, they wrote New Zealand, and they couldn't find anyone. So they got an Australian and said, good enough.
Well, you know the reason why we never got too much more of him after that.
Well,
the ocean is dangerous water.
It is dangerous water.
Yeah, and he got splashed with it.
And then his body went limp. And then he never could get up until that fight later. He got his ass kicked. So there you go. But you were saying you were familiar with the idea that the boat going to the island. I didn't realize that was this movie in particular. Like I when it was giving me that premise, I was like, oh yes, I know this premise. I've seen it before in other things. I didn't realize that this was the movie in particular.
Yeah, it took me a very long time to realize, like, oh, that's like specifically this Enter the Dragon film. Okay. I think even when we I guess we can call it guested on that Sin Radio thing a few years ago, and they told us, there was a Mortal Kombat film announced. We'll talk about that. We didn't end up talking about it, but I was going to mention, like, oh yeah, apparently it's like an Enter the Dragon-y kind of story, because the first Mortal Kombat, I think, it basically does have that setup of going to an island to fight the villain or something like that. So eventually at some point in my life, I realized, it mostly points to this Enter the Dragon film.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the big reasons why I wanted to watch it was, well, let's see that origin of this idea, just see, how that was done. And there was a sense, watching it that, like, okay, this is so familiar that it almost feels like I have seen it before, not just because of Fistful of Yen being an almost direct copy of it, but just parody comedic wise. But yeah, just so many things have used this idea to where it was believable that this is what it was from.
Yeah, I agree with you on that sentiment, and exactly. I loved those secondary characters, whether they were the henchmen or the other people in the fight, or the madam that had all of her girls, and I thought the film littered itself with very fun side pieces to this, because Bruce Lee is very, very, like, the camera knew how to capture that guy. Like, he is a screen presence. But they don't just rely on that alone. They don't just rely on this being a movie where Bruce Lee takes his shirt off and shows off how fucking jacked he is. There's more to it than that. There's comedy here. There's intrigue. There's suspense. There's character dynamics. Like, the two guys cheated, like, betting on fights, and there's that other guy, the little Asian guy with the little mustache, and just all that back and forth made the film's setting feel alive.
The praying mantis fight,
more real. Yeah, the praying mantis fight. That's actually a great example too. And or the quote unquote New Zealand guy getting tricked into going in the boat, and then off he goes, and then Bruce hands the rope to the ship hands and the little kid and all that, and they're like, no, you can play with them. And all of that was a lot more fun than what I was expecting, which is a movie where Bruce gets on a boat, goes to the island, and he shows off he's the best.
Yeah,
because the movie starts with him being the best.
Yeah, but even then, like, we were talking about it literally before we came here to record, like in your living room. We were comparing it to, like, Schwarzenegger, or the idea of, like, the Hollywood action star, especially from, like, the 80s, where they were a lot more buff and cool and thing like that. And then I pointed out, well, at the beginning of the film, we did have, like, shirtless Bruce Lee, like, being there on camera, and there was this real sense of, like, oh, this guy's actually a lot smaller than I think of the legend, and he's not as bulky as I would think of, like, the strong fighting guy. Like, he had muscles, but it was very clear that, like, his nimbleness and his moves were, what got him I don't want to just say like it was only one or two things that got him through it, but he wasn't, the common Western idea of the big action hero.
Yeah.
And it was interesting just seeing that.
And we even see him fight those type of body shapes,
like that Bolo guy in the film.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I think there's an element too of, we're looking at, in part Asian cinema. We're looking at a well-known fighter and actor and overall star from this area, and there's this certain idea of what these people like these kind of movie stars look like, act like, presence of them. And it's just interesting when you actually when you actually go and watch the films, how much of that is actually real and how much isn't. Because it's very amusing, because I always think of Jackie Chan movies, right? Where it's just like, oh, Jackie Chan, he went to the West and he did all those little comedy films. And then there's this thing where it's like, oh, but Jackie Chan's one of the best movie fighters of all time. And he's excellent. And he's oh, yeah, of course. And he's badass, right? And then you watch a lot of his films and they're basically Buster Keaton, slapstick, over the top comedy action films where it's just impressive, the scale of how much they involve the physical sets in their fights as well as their choreography and moves. And
the stunts that he does, which are all real.
Because I grew up thinking that Jackie Chan came to America to do comedies as a thing. But I didn't realize when I was younger that his films back in his earlier career were also funny, and that he's a funny, overall he's always been kind of a funny guy. I thought he was like a Bruce Lee, where it's serious and badass, and it was kind of every now and then he may have a humorous moment like Bruce does here, of Bruce's growing relationship with the snake is amusing. But overall I wouldn't say Bruce Lee is funny. He's amusing, he has his moments, but Jackie Chan, I thought he was similar, but then I've seen his movies and they're no, they're just really funny, high octane action slapsticks in many regards.
I had similar ideas, but to be honest, I think the first time I heard Jackie Chan's name was when I was a kid and I watched Dragon Ball, and Roshi called himself Jackie Chun at one point. And then I heard of the adventures of Jackie Chan. I'm oh, it's based on that Dragon Ball guy. And then I found out, oh, it's a real guy.
Yeah. He was in Shanghai Nights. Sequel to Shanghai Noon with Owen Wilson.
And you know what else he was in?
Oh, come on.
Enter the Dragon.
Yeah. You know what? I did try to keep an eye out for him, but then there came a point where I stopped trying because I just wanted to enjoy the film.
Yeah, I knew that there was that trivia point of oh, he was actually a minor extra in this film, and I kind of gave up on the idea of, walking in looking for him because I didn't think I'd do it. So after the film was over, I looked at the YouTube video of his scene.
Yeah.
It's in the cave shortly after the snake thing.
I read that he was in the cave and all
he he runs in from the side to bear hug Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee knocks him off. He's grappling him and beating up some people beating up some people at the same time, then he throws him, and that's the one shot.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
It was a slow motion upload of the video, so you get a look at him, and he's a bit too young for me to recognize that that's him, but you could see little facial features okay, maybe that is Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan's always had a little baby face, so imagine him even younger. It's pre-born, so there you go. The music was excellent. The 70s, just bassy, everything. I loved every moment of that. You had a good laugh at you having all this crazy action happening. It's oh man, how's he gonna get out of this? And he's tricking him here and doing all this, and then hard cut over to Braithwaite in bed with a hot, a woman walking over with his stuff, and he's oh, what's going on here today? I know, right? I found out about this half an hour ago. Get him out of bed. I had a good chuckle at how we diverted away from everything that we were liking and here for, and the fists against the face to an old man reading in bed.
I kind of forgot that he came to the island, to be honest. Yeah. It's oh, you're here too, Braithwaite.
And he's oh, dear Lord. I gotta help him.
Yeah. Well, earlier on, he really wanted Bruce Lee to have some. Oh, Mr. Lee is his character's name. Sorry.
Thank you.
He wanted Mr. Lee to have some alcohol with him. He's like, you sure you don't want any?
Yeah, he was fun. I enjoyed him. He was a fun little character, like 2 or 3 scene wonder.
Yeah, and him, coming in being this like kind of mysterious agent, give you some MI6 vibes, and you kind of get like the spy genre stuff for the night scenes where Bruce Lee's sneaking around, which were also fun.
You know this. I've been playing Metal Gear Solid series recently,
Yep.
and I
you're up to the spy one.
I just started Metal Gear Solid 3, where instead your guy's a British man who's like, "Hello there, go blimey," and it was just amusing to see this. I'm like, hey, this is basically what's happening in my Metal Gear game.
You're playing
right
the
now.
60s spy Metal Gear game, yeah.
Yeah, while I watch the 60s spy thing.
Early 70s, but close enough.
Oh yeah, sorry, early 70s.
That's fine.
You know what? We're allowed to get some things wrong.
It's from 2005. Who cares? I think 2006. I think actually.
Let's call it quits and call it 1999. That's when the year ended. That's when the world ended because Y2K. Don't you remember?
To be fair,
Leonard Nimoy tried to warn us about it.
I kind of don't, because at the time I was still trying to master the
English language?
The art of the English language, yeah.
And have you?
Y2K was too hard for me to understand at the time.
Did you master it?
Yes, I did.
That's just how girls speak nowadays, Bartek.
Yes, queen, I did.
Slay?
Slay queen.
This is what people want to hear in the Enter the Dragon discussion. You saying slay, queen, yas, and all of that.
TikTok.
Just
TikTok.
Not even the app, just the noise a clock makes. TikTok.
Gwen Stefani song TikTok.
Is it Gwen Stefani? TikTok.
I was going to say I'm going to be embarrassed if I'm wrong, but I don't think I actually am going to be
Which one was
embarrassed.
Kesha? Kesha had a song that was famous, and it was about her getting out of bed and getting drunk, probably.
That's relatable.
It is, isn't it? That's kind of what this movie is really about. It's about getting up, going out at night, getting framed. Because you did that one action, people think that you did all these other things, and then they beat you the fuck up in front of all these women. And then you get hung up over some evil water. And then your friend gets to see you get dropped into the evil water.
Are we talking about Kesha or Enter the Dragon?
well, I mean, this happened to Kesha. We all heard this story.
The dangerous water.
Kesha, that was her story with her evil producer that she's been in legal battles with all these years. That's where, yeah. This movie.
Did she have a Braithwaite?
Well, yeah, probably. Russell Brand, I'm sure, was around. He's the modern Braithwaite. Russell Brand.
Star of St. Trinians.
Star of St. Trinians and the remake of Arthur.
That's true.
That's true. But back to the real story at hand here.
Kesha.
Opium. I had a good chuckle at, I don't know if I found this a satisfying thing, but there's this moment where the bad guy's touring Mr. Roper around, and Roper's like, "Oh, hello there," to these women, and one of them flips him over, and there's like, "These are my daughters. Nobody protects daddy better than daughters." And I'm like, did they ever come back?
I don't think so, because...
They make a big deal. It's like, these daughters are the most elite fighters on the island, and then it's like, that was it.
Were there any action scenes on the island that involved the women?
Well, we know that the madam got killed in one of the fights.
Yeah.
Well, other than his sister.
That's what I mean, on the island, yeah.
It's not really coming to my mind, unless you want to count that one nurse beating up that opium addict as an action scene. That one 1 second shot where that one woman who was like banging on the glass saying, "Save me, help me. And then the nurse came in and was like, "Shut up," inside.
Yeah, I'll count that as girl on girl, yeah.
I knew you were saying it makes me think of Hot Fuzz every time when I hear girl on girl, where at the end of Hot Fuzz, Olivia Colman's character, she grabs like the wet floor sign and smacks that woman in the face, the one who's like running down the aisle, and she smacks her in the face, and like she flips over, and it's like all serious, and then Olivia Colman's like, nothing wrong with a bit of girl on girl. It's just like,
I think I remember
thank you, Olivia Colman, Oscar-winning actress Olivia Colman. I love that's so amusing. But the actress who she hit was also in, I want to say St. Trinian's as well.
Oh, really?
Lucy Punch. She was in some movie we did where she was playing. What's that game they play?
Badminton?
Or
I was right. Just to let everyone know, Ryan did a motion. So.
No, what's that game that they play where they have the big sticks? Lacrosse. I think
there's another name for it, but
lacrosse. I think it's lacrosse. But she's an actress, Lucy Punch, I think it's Lucy Punch. She's famous for playing this evil, ugly stepsisters and Cinderella in like 4 different movies.
Oh, wow.
Because when she was a little girl, she had a Cinderella party every year where she demanded to play the ugly step, like dress up as the ugly step. And her mum apparently phoned her after seeing one of her movies and said, "Darling, not again."
That's a lot of, that's the lady in the film who was like, "Save me, save me."
Yeah.
That's fun. I didn't expect to learn much about that character, that entity that was in the film.
That entity. No.
They were just a pawn in this chess game, but no, they were actually a living person.
Yeah. I would love it if it was the same actress, actually, because this one is blonde too. But no. To get back into the real meat of the movie here, which is there was a snake in the film. It's like keep diverting to the weirdest aspects of the film.
I mean, it was a memorable aspect.
I like that he had a little bag to put the snake in, like, and he forgot, and then he remembered that he had a snake in his bag, and he's like, "Hey, I could use this."
Yeah,
and
similar to the Road Warrior. Used it to get around an issue.
It was really funny to me. I noticed, I was like, oh, he's sitting near the door, and the door is like pretty high off the ground. So I was like, oh, well, he's going to just slip the snake through under the door. But no, he opens the door and throws it in, closes it, and the bad guys in there don't even think to look who was at the door.
See, in Metal Gear Solid 3, they would notice the door opening.
They would?
Yeah, unless you were very gentle.
Yeah. And you better not eat nearby, because if you eat, you make that was lovely, and then they're like, who was that?
No, they'll hear your stomach. No, you should eat, because they'll hear your stomach grumbling.
Oh, well, I'm always eating rats, and they're like, who's that? But they don't know that I'm under the building that they're on, so they're just running around going, where is he? Where is this guy?
What fools.
You
should blow up their ration station.
Would this movie have been better if Bruce Lee just meowed, and that's what brought in all of the goons?
There was a cat in the film. You'd think that we could get a meow. Just to summon the cat, maybe.
What was your favorite actions? Like, what was your favorite fight, like, in terms of 1v1? Because it's easy to say the best action is the cave stuff. I mean, that's where the movie fires off on all
That's very true.
I'll tell you that the final guy, the big boss, that wasn't my favorite fight. I like it on a visual level of terms of the mirrors.
Well, that one was more of a set piece one.
It's like literal set piece. Like here's the set, and look at this go. While I preferred his fight against the guy with the scar on his face.
O'Hara?
Yeah. I thought that was a fun fight.
That was, a lot of the ones.
His ass.
A lot of the ones before the final fight were pretty good. Yeah. Even the opening one where we were talking about the close-ups. I mean, there really wasn't any like boring or bad fight, but you're right. A lot of the cave stuff does spring to mind because it's. It's the nameless mooks that you're fighting, so it's a
memorable set.
It's memorable, and you get a lot of variety of like, I'll take them out with this one move.
And then I got a stick.
Yeah, the like Kali sticks or whatever.
Yeah, but then when he had the first one was like just that big rod that he had, and then he threw that away and exchanged it for new weapons. That's another thing I love in these movies, when they upgrade their weapons.
It's very. We were also talking about beat 'em up games before we started recording, and that's also a convention of them where it's like, there's weapons littered all around the levels, so pick them up, use them for a while, then get the new ones.
Yeah,
hit them.
He went from snake in a bag to like his fists to a big stick to those little sticks, and to eventually he got a spear at one point, and that was when he was fighting the big boss, and that's what kills the big boss.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, oh yeah, the spear's in the mirror.
Yeah. He got that at one point. Just all these different little things he just grabbed onto and just used to his benefit, but he didn't keep them with him throughout the movie. He just kind of threw them away. It's like, I need a new one because that's beaten up enough people for today.
I think in I was going to suddenly bring something up, and I was going to be like, oh, I was expecting you to bring that up, but there was an episode of Fat Pizza. I guess it still happened, didn't it?
Man, no, that's related to Saved by the Bell, Grand Theft Auto.
And Eurotrip.
Eurotrip, and, what's that fucking band you used to bring up all the S Club 7?
S Club 7?
Let's bring them up too. Go on.
What did I bring up again? Fat Pizza.
If I said Screech, you would have found a way to connect it.
Right, there was that episode where Screech fought Bruce Willis. Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee. Jesus.
One of my favorite episodes of Fat Pizza is one where it's Paulie's dad's backstory and how he went to, like, in almost Forrest Gump way, he was, like, in all these significant places in history. And I think there was one point where he went to some gathering that Bruce Lee was at. I think it was basically the area that, like, the film began, where, like, people were all around and he, like, fought Bruce Lee. It was like he put up a good fight against Bruce Lee. I think they were, like, evenly matched. So seeing the fight at the beginning of this, it's like, oh, if we were here, like, you know, a few minutes later, Paulie's dad would show up and have a fight with Bruce Lee.
You mentioned the nunchucks. I love nunchucks in general. I think they're fun. I have a couple in this room, in fact.
Is that legal in this country?
It may be. Sure.
Okay. Well,
yes.
Editing note. You might have to delete this part.
No, I'm going to amplify it and say that I also have bokkens. But I think those are legal too. They better be.
I mean,
bokkens are fine.
They're not real swords. So.
Hear that, everybody? Bartek said it. They're not real swords. Swords are real swords. It's Japanese for Japanese sword.
Is that what bokken means?
I wish.
Japanese for wooden stick.
But I love nunchucks. I loved when he grabbed them and he, you know, did the whole demonstrating with them, and you just know.
God, that was fluid.
It was just happening right in front of your fucking eyes.
Like I've seen so many parodies of like that one shot in so many things, and like the gopher chucks, yeah. But yeah, just seeing the real thing there and just like. God, it's so fast, and it's almost like he's a ghost and it's going through him.
Yeah, one of my favorite parodies of that, or like homages to that in a comedic sense, is there's this movie, it's like an Italian comedy film, and this guy is doing that, like this wimpy guy's doing that, and the nunchucks get stuck around his neck and he starts to like start choking, and the like comedy hero guy is just standing there, and he's like, oh my God, and he runs over like, are you okay? You could have really hurt yourself with these. He's like helping him untangle them, and they like pat each other on the back and like, oh thank God, that could have gone really sour. And then they realize they have to keep fighting each other because it's the dynamic of, you know, film where it's like, oh well, that's right, I'm hero and you're goon, and they start fighting again. I just love that type of thing. But
what was this again?
Oh, it was this Italian comedy. I have to remember the name of it, like the English name. It's one of those ones where it's like the English name is like
right, okay.
Weird.
Well, I know what you're not picking for next week.
No. Oh, God, unless I'm lying.
Unless you do remember it, in which case I know what you're picking for next week.
It's a Mad. Well, no.
It's a Mad Max.
Mad Max. But I thought the nighttime scenes were shot magnificently as well. The sense of geography of this island was really laid out. I felt bad that Williams died. I liked him. He was a good character.
Like I said, he really grasped my attention whenever he was on screen because he just had that look.
Is it because he fucked multiple women at the same time?
Well, I mean, I was looking at him before that, but, you know, when he was doing his selection scene, like, I want you, and you. It's like, very, very thinking man's kind
I thought that was you saying... Like, I want you, and you to just Williams standing by himself in the room.
I want your hair.
And your sideburns. And your muscles. And your sense of fashion.
No, I won't say that. Go on.
You coward. UK. It's,
Should I say
it's
then?
offensive, isn't it? It's going to be offensive. Bartek is like, it's bad when Bartek flinches at his own comment he's going to make because he's very Bartek. We know he's just off the cuff makes remarks.
I haven't worked out yet if jig was meant to be a racial slur or not.
I think it is, man.
Okay, then.
It was white cops saying it, and it was worthy of their car being stolen. They
said it twice, yeah.
And it was worthy of their car being stolen. So
yeah, they got beaten up and their car was still stolen, so it must have been pretty bad.
Do you think the car found its way home?
If this had like a Pixar film sequel, then yes. Really serious stuff happening on that island, but back on the mainland, we have a Pixar film happening.
When you say serious stuff, you mean a guy with a claw for a hand running around slashing people? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the drug trafficking, sex trafficking stuff, that was more what I was thinking.
That was serious. They just dumped them in the water and let them go when they were dead.
Was it the dangerous water, though?
Well, it was dangerous because it made their body go limp.
Well, there you go.
Every water is somewhat dangerous.
Earlier I said the ocean is dangerous water, and now I'm talking about Pixar Finding Nemo, so really, I don't know. Maybe there's just no consistency with what I'm saying this episode.
Well, let me make it better. There was an unappreciated masterpiece that took place under the sea.
And there was mafia there. Jewish, Italian, we don't know, but there was a mafia in that film.
Martin Scorsese was there. Peter
Falk was there.
Jack Black was there.
For some reason, Tracy Grimshaw was there in my copy.
And of course, we're talking about the cinematic beauty that is Shark Tale.
Yep.
Starring Angelina Jolie as a sexy fish.
And Will Smith, whose career's really taken off.
Wow. That was an Oscar-nominated film.
Was it?
Well, it was an animated film from that time.
It must have been.
So it must have been Oscar nominated. I'm putting it down. Must have been. And Will was just gearing up for an Oscar win for that. He didn't get it. And he said, I'm going to be really angry about this.
And the PS2 game had a stealth section, not unlike this film, Enter the Dragon.
Oh, they're going to say like Metal Gear.
I haven't heard of Metal Gear.
Oh, well, it's about a fish.
That gets eaten by a guy going through the jungle.
It's about a fish that wants to open up, wants to move away from his car wash job. Mm-hmm. I love if we sat down a kid and said, okay, the plot of this movie Shark Tale, and just describe Metal Gear to them.
Did you read the YouTube comments for our Harley Davidson episode?
I heard a lot of back and forth. I saw there was a lot of messages being flung around.
Yeah, apparently I somehow convinced him to watch our Shark Tale episode.
Well, everybody should check out our Shark Tale episode. It's a masterpiece.
But that might inadvertently get him to watch Shark Tale as well. So I unintentionally convinced someone to watch Shark Tale.
What a power you hold. Enter the Dragon, I can't think of too much else to say. It is very efficient at what it does. It's just a lean, mean fighting machine like the lead actor. It is personally my favorite Bruce Lee film I've watched, and I think it is often acclaimed as the quintessential one, like the best one.
It's definitely the one that apparently spawned the craze of these kind of martial arts films in the West.
Do you want to discuss the Bruce Lee exploitation genre some more? Because you've only kind of briefly touched on it in this episode and the last one.
Yeah, from what little I remember about it. Basically, when we talk about exploitation films, they refer to films that, exploit or focus on a specific thing that they want to get out there. So you might consider porn films sexploitation films because you're exploiting sex and getting people to watch these films for the sex. You mentioned blaxploitation films, black characters in the 70s are over the top, very stereotypical and awesome to watch. There is a subgenre, well, there's a million subgenres, but one of them is the Bruceploitation films, where, Bruce Lee films, as few as there were, apparently there were more than 6, they were few, but they were very awesome. And, how do you capitalize on a genre where an actor is, kind of the center figure of it? You hire people that look like him and do things similar to him. So you have a bunch of Bruceploitation films where the lead actors typically have names that are very similar to Bruce Lee.
Yeah, Mr. Bruce Wee.
Or something like that, or straight up lie and say it's Bruce Lee. Like one that I'm aware of, I haven't watched it yet, but I have a DVD copy of it called The Clones of Bruce Lee, where the gimmick is that there are 4 Bruce Lee guys in that film, and they all have those fake names like Bruce Lee, Bruce Lai, Bruce Lay, or something like that. And there's 4 Bruce Lees running
and they
around.
must fight each other.
I think at first they're like working
Together.
Their own separate parts of this one big case, but I think there might be a climactic fight in the end.
I did read there was one of the movies, on IMDb, and it's like these other movies, and I was like, oh, I don't know this one, and I pressed on it, and it was like fairly low rated. It's like it's got Bruce Lee, it's by this director, and it's like I think it's a movie where he was making another film, never got completed because he died unexpectedly, and so these people did a bit of a Pink Panther deal and or Ed Wood deal where they have existing leftover footage of a dead person and they cobble it together and have a body stand in to fill in the bits and bobs.
Is that Game of Death?
Yes,
yeah.
I think so.
Because my understanding of the trivia that apparently I'm wrong about, the thing where he only did 6 films, the thing about Enter the Dragon is it's the 4th one, but it's also the last one that was completed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I was like, I looked up that one, and people were like, yeah, Bruce Lee's back is the lead star of this film, like and because it's like, well, that's what they had. These are the bits that they can cobble together. It's like technically, I can't remember which Pink Panther it is. It was like technically, Peter Sellers is in this Pink Panther because they cobbled together some scenes of him, but he was dead.
Okay,
and then it's like, and now we follow his son. And or some bullshit like that.
I actually haven't heard of this.
Yeah, the Pink Panther movies are odd. Like after he leaves and or has passed away, they try to get away with like another guy playing Clouseau, and then like, no, let's get his son, and then no, let's get his another relative, and then no, let's get Steve Martin.
Well, I'm gathering that Sellers exploitation never really took off then.
Well, I mean, everybody has their version of a Sellers performance.
That's a fair point.
You know what? The Sellers verse is pretty nuanced and deep. Even Jeffrey Rush got a crack at it when he played Peter Sellers in that biofilm. So there you go.
There you go.
But no, this was a fun one. I enjoyed myself. Well, it's a great, it's a crowd pleaser of a film.
Yeah.
And it doesn't outstay its welcome. It's brilliantly paced. The
sure.
action is legendary. It speaks for itself, and if not, every other film afterwards will make sure that it speaks for it. It honestly feels like made me think about how much of an uproar there was a few years back when it came to Bruce Lee because of Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
And I didn't really pay heed to that because I was like, well, it's Tarantino, it's a movie, it's not real, I don't really care.
Well, I think it was the family of Bruce Lee that had a big problem with it.
And fans.
And
fans of Bruce. And...
But with the family thing, if anyone's gonna have a legitimate problem with it, it's got to be the family.
But
or the estate of Bruce Lee.
revisiting a Bruce Lee movie, I was kind of like, I can understand why fans of this actor and why family members of this actor were kind of pissed off at that kind of representation of him in the movie. Even though I thought it was a funny scene, and I got what it was doing narratively in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I'm like, yeah, it's a move to make.
Yeah, and I
sure.
guess we just didn't really have much of a stake in it as the fans or the estate of Bruce Lee. So yeah.
Yeah, it seems like behind the scenes, like in this movie, if people challenged him to a fight, he'll take it to prove that he's a good fighter because people would say like he's a phony or whatever.
I think there was another trivia point that said like Bruce Lee was goading them and like, I'll give anyone who can stop one of my blows $100, and it's like he didn't lose any money.
Yeah.
I also enjoyed this film and I do recommend it. In terms of
you recommended it, so there you go.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it before, so I had to determine if I recommend it. In terms of ranking it with the other ones, I don't remember Fists of Fury as well since it's been literally 10 years since we watched it. But I think I gravitate a bit more towards the Big Boss, and there were some elements of Way of the Dragon that, a bit more outright comedic, so that kind of tickled my sensibility. I think I would at least put it below the Big Boss. I really enjoyed that film, but still, this is quintessential martial arts film, evidently. It has all these great elements of the 70s aesthetic. There were some elements of what Bruce Lee wanted with like the Chinese beauty coming along, like especially that party scene where they first get to the island and you have like that dragon thing walking through the party. It's like, oh, that thing's interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see why America considers this. I forget what those 3 adjectives are, but like culturally significant. Like it's in that like
it's a touchstone event.
Yeah, one of those aesthetically. I forget the adjectives, but it's considered very significant part of cinematic history.
It's a seminal film.
Seminal. That word, I've heard it before.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Definitely.
Yeah, I recommend this, obviously. It's a crowd pleaser. You can watch it on your own or with a group of people, and you'll have a good time. It is something that I will want to watch again a few years down the road.
It puts the art in martial arts.
Yeah, it really does. And so there we go. I think it's time to find out what I'm recommending for the next episode.
Yeah.
I have a few things going back and forth. I wanted to be somebody who recommended a new film that I haven't seen before. We've been having some fun with that. But after watching this was like really influenced what I wanted to watch next.
Sure.
Which is, I want to watch a Western because there's just some vibe.
Well,
about
we did one last week, right?
Hey, you know what we haven't mentioned enough in this discussion? We already watched a Bruce Lee movie before.
They Call Me Bruce.
They Call Me Bruce with the Polish kung fu guys.
I cannot remember. Did he do martial arts in that film?
I don't remember. I'm sure our good friend Chris can tell us all about it because he's an expert.
Yeah, Chris, who, by the way, is the one that gave me a copy of Clones of Bruce Lee.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. And you've cherished it ever since.
I've cherished it. Haven't watched it yet, but I have to.
But no, I was thinking it's time for a Western because you're right. In a way, like, we've been kind of dancing around it with Harley Davidson. Marlboro Man has that definite, like, you have a cowboy in it, but not really.
That was a complete joke that we're dancing around, but yeah.
But now this, there's certain films like, your fighting films like this that, it makes you want to watch films of other genres that kind of hover around the same area. Because this is very much a, quiet movie. Like the protagonist is, very softly spoken, rarely speaks, and they just fucking get the job done because it's what they do. And so I want to watch They Call Me Trinity.
I really thought you were going to say They Call Me Bruce.
They Call Me Trinity, which is a spaghetti western. We'll be watching it with the English dub because, well, that's just how it exists.
Is that He's the guy who's the talking
famous song that we like a lot? We used it for our Soviet Western. Django Unchained ended with that song. I remember when I watched, and I will talk about it next week again, but when I watched Django Unchained, he was using all of these songs from all of these spaghetti westerns I knew, as well as modern songs, and I was sitting there going, when's he going to use any from Trinity? And then he ends the movie on it, and I remember in the cinema going, finally! Wow, I was waiting for that to happen, because, Tarantino's predictable! No, so They Call Me Trinity, we'll be watching that English dub, or whatever country you come from, watch it in whatever dub you have, because it is a spaghetti western where they did the film it with no audio, dub them over with these. Even if they could speak the language, they would just dub them over anyway. It didn't matter.
It's one of those ones, spaghetti western, right?
Yep, so we'll be giving that a look over. So thank you so much for listening to us talk about everything but this film. Nah, I'm kidding. We talked about this film.
We talked about Fat Pizza.
Yeah. We both were going to the Fat Pizza zone.
Next episode, watching the Fat Pizza movie.
Oh.
No, just kidding. The Contrarians are.
Wouldn't that be a power move? If we recommended to an American podcast to watch Fat Pizza, the movie.
Well, I remember one of the last times we talked to them, you guys were talking about how they're on an Australian bender, and it didn't occur to me at the time, but afterwards I'm like, we should have brought up Fat Pizza.
Yeah, let's make them watch Housos versus Fat Pizza.
Houses versus Authority, Houses versus Fat Pizza.
Yeah, we should make them, you know what? At some point, we're going to convince an American podcast to watch the Australian comedic franchise Fat Pizza.
We should actually get them to watch Fat Pizza because that's where Rebel Wilson started in the franchise.
Is she in the film?
Yeah, that's the first time she appeared. She wasn't even in love with Habib at that point.
Oh, I forgot that's where she came from. I thought she was in the show already. I can't remember.
No, because in the movie, like, she was into Paulie, and that's not in the show. She's with Habib.
Well, yeah, the lore from the movie didn't always carry over to the show, except for Sleek's fate kind of did.
Well, that's where
it ends, right? He comes back though, doesn't he?
He comes back in the revival. No, in Fat Pizza vs. Houses, he comes back.
Oh, there you go. So you know what? I've changed my recommendation. Next week, we're doing Fat Pizza the movie with the Contrarians. How I organized it with them? No. But you better be prepared. No. It's Call Me Trinity. So they call me Trinity. So that is it. You can find us on the social medias of Facebook and Twitter under Spit and Polish Presents. We post on there. We interact with all of the folks. So come on over, support us, follow us. You can rate and review us on whatever podcatcher you use to do so. We have an email, which is Bartek.
It's not Bartek, it's spitandpolished@gmail.com.
So you can drop us a line, give us a recommendation for films, and we'll put them on the list. We need more on the list. We've got a few new recommendations, but it's always good to get some more from you. Not you, Bartek. I know I pointed at you, but I was pointing at the royal you.
It's okay. The pop filter was in the way anyway.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. And Bartek's blind as a bat. He can't see things from a certain distance.
Whoa, did you just call me a bat?
Oh, God. Should I have called you a jig or something?
My original line was, well, I don't want to be a jig. But...
There you go.
So it would have been appropriate if I didn't cow it out.
How do we end this? Do I ask you if you think Bruce Lee was sexy? On a scale of 1 to 10, how hot?
I honestly can't say it really crossed my mind when I was watching. Yeah.
Really? I mean, he was taking his shirt off and flexing, and I was like, gee whiz.
But Williams was in the film, and so was Wraithwalt, or whatever his name was.
Braithwaite.
Braithwaite.
Wow, you're not even turned on by Bruce. You were too busy looking at Williams.
The Westerners.
Wow. The Westerners.
They're both Western.
Yeah. No, you're right. You got it. Thank you. It's just the way you said it.
Well, look, Ryan, if you think about geographically, we're Australians. We're actually Eastern.
Yeah.
Melbourne.
And we're on the eastern suburbs of the city we live in, and on the side of Australia.
Technically, I'm in the southeastern.
What words in that? It's eastern. There you go. Nailed him. Got him in the grave. And Bartek's address is 123 Fake Street.
That's a Simpsons reference.